The knife was already in his hand when Elena walked into the great hall. She stopped at the doorway, her breath catching, because she had come to find her husband for their anniversary dinner, and instead, she found him standing before the entire pack council, with a blade turned toward the light. Beside him stood Seraphine, smiling the way a fox smiles at a bird that has just noticed the trap. "Damien," Elena said carefully, "what is happening here?" The Alpha King did not look at her the way he used to. There was no warmth in his eyes, only a hard, guarded distance, as if he had already decided something, and was simply waiting for the room to catch up. The pack elders sat frozen in their seats, unwilling to speak, unwilling to move. "Elena," he said, his voice flat, "come closer." She should have run. Later, she would think about that moment for the rest of her life, wondering why her feet carried her forward instead of away. But love does strange things to good sense, and Elena still loved him, even after 5 years of small cruelties she had chosen to forgive. She walked to the center of the hall. Seraphine's smile widened. "You know the law," Damien said. "You know what your hair means to this pack." Elena's hand rose instinctively to the long braid that fell past her waist, the same hair she had never once cut since the night of their moon bonding. Every wolf in the Blackthorn territory knew the old story. Luna's uncut hair was a living promise to the moon goddess, a symbol that the bond between Alpha and Luna remained unbroken, that the pack's strength flowed from a marriage built on trust. Cutting it was not a small thing. It was not a haircut, it was a declaration. "Damien, please," Elena whispered. "Whatever she has told you, whatever lies she has poisoned your mind with, we can talk about this privately." "There is nothing private left," Seraphine said sweetly, stepping forward. "The Alpha and I have an understanding, Elena, and you, unfortunately, are the price of my silence." Elena's stomach turned to ice. Silence about what? Nobody answered her. Damien's jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes, something that might have been shame, but it vanished as quickly as it came, buried under years of pride, and the strange, dark hold Seraphine had built over him piece by piece, night by night, lie by lie. "Kneel," he said. The word landed in the hall like a stone dropped into still water. Even the elders gasped. Luna did not kneel before her Alpha in front of the council. It was unheard of. It was, by every tradition the pack had ever known, a humiliation reserved only for prisoners and traitors. Elena did not move. "I said kneel," Damien repeated, louder now, his wolf rising just beneath the surface of his voice, the authority of the Alpha bearing down on her like a physical weight. Wolves lower in the pack hierarchy could feel that command pressing against their spines, an instinct as old as their blood, urging obedience. But Elena was not lower in the hierarchy. She was his equal. She was his Luna. And for one long, aching moment, she considered refusing him completely, turning on her heel, and walking out of that hall forever. Instead, she thought of the pack. And she thought of the young wolves who had not yet chosen sides, the children who watched their parents for signs of how to survive in a world ruled by strength. If she refused him now, in front of everyone, it could split the pack in two: rebellion, bloodshed. She had seen what internal wars did to neighboring territories, how quickly unity became ash. So Elena knelt. The elders looked away, some out of respect, some out of shame, unable to watch what was about to happen. Damien crossed the distance between them. Up close, she could see the war happening behind his eyes, the tiny war between the man she married and the Alpha he had let himself become. For one heartbeat, she thought he might stop. She thought he might drop the knife, take her hand, and tell the council this had all been some terrible mistake, some test he needed to end immediately. He did not. He gathered her braid in his fist. "Damien," her voice cracked, not from fear of pain, because there would be no physical pain in this, but from something deeper, something that felt like watching a bridge burn while you still stood on it. "Do you understand what you are doing? Do you understand what this means for us?" "I understand," he said quietly, so quietly only she could hear it, "that I have no choice. Everyone has a choice." His hand trembled, just slightly, and for one final second, hope flickered in Elena's chest. Then the knife moved. The braid fell to the stone floor with a soft, terrible sound, like a whisper of finality. Elena did not cry out. She did not weep. She simply knelt there, feeling strangely lighter and infinitely heavier at the same time, watching years of her life, her vows, her identity as Luna, lying severed at her knees. Seraphine stepped forward and lifted the fallen braid from the ground with 2 fingers, as though it were nothing more than a discarded ribbon. "A generous gift," she said, examining it. "Thank you, my Alpha." The words "my Alpha" echoed through the hall, and Elena felt something inside her crack that had nothing to do with hair or tradition. It was the sound of a marriage ending, spoken casually, almost playfully, by another woman entirely. Elena rose to her feet on her own. No one helped her. No one dared. She looked at her husband, searching his face for any trace of the boy she had fallen in love with 15 years ago, back when he was just a second son, with no crown and no responsibilities, back when he used to run through the eastern forest with her under the full moon and laugh like nothing in the world could ever hurt them. She found nothing of him there now. "You have made your choice," Elena said, and her voice, though quiet, carried through the entire hall. "I hope it was worth it." She turned and walked out, her steps steady, her spine straight, refusing to give either of them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But behind her, as she crossed the threshold of the great hall, something strange happened. The torches lining the walls flickered violently, as though a wind had swept through the room, though every window remained shut. A few of the older wolves who still remembered the ancient stories exchanged uneasy glances. They knew what such signs meant. The moon goddess did not take insults lightly. Outside, beneath the open sky, Elena finally allowed herself to stop walking. She stood in the courtyard, the night air cold against her now shortened hair, and looked up at the moon, full and silver and watching, as it always watched. "I kept my promise," she whispered to the sky. "I never asked for this." The moon offered no answer. Not yet. But somewhere deep within her chest, a strange new warmth stirred, faint as a candle flame in a dark room, small enough to ignore, but there all the same. Inside the hall, Damien stood frozen, staring at the door his wife had just walked through, the knife still loose in his hand. Seraphine curled her fingers around his arm, pressing close, whispering something about how proud she was of him, how strong he had been to finally put that woman in her place. But Damien barely heard her. He was staring at the fallen strands of hair still scattered across the floor, and for reasons he could not explain, a cold unease was crawling up his spine, the same unease a man feels the instant after signing a contract he has not fully read. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself Elena would forgive him, the way she always forgave him. He told himself the pack would move on, the elders would forget, and life would return to what it had been before. He was wrong on every count, though he would not understand exactly how wrong for several more days. That night, as the Blackthorn estate settled into an uneasy silence, Marcus, the pack's beta and Elena's oldest friend, found her sitting alone by the old stone well, at the edge of the training grounds, her shortened hair catching the moonlight in a way that seemed, impossibly, brighter than it should have been. "Elena," Marcus approached carefully, the way one approaches a wounded animal, unsure whether kindness would be welcomed, or would only make things worse. "I saw what happened. I am so sorry. I should have stepped in. I should have said something." "There was nothing to say," Elena replied without looking at him. "He is the Alpha. His word is law." "His word is not supposed to be cruelty," Marcus said, sitting beside her. "There is a difference between leadership and control, Elena. He forgot that difference a long time ago, and I fear it started long before tonight." Elena finally turned to him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Not sadness exactly, though sadness lived there too, but something sharper underneath it, something that looked almost like clarity. "Do you know the old stories?" she asked. "The ones about the sacred hair, and what happens to an alpha who cuts it without his Luna's blessing." Marcus hesitated. "I know pieces. My grandmother used to tell them, back before the elders decided such stories were only for children." "Tell me everything you remember," Elena said, "because I have a feeling we are about to find out whether they were only stories, or whether they were something else entirely." Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly, understanding that whatever was coming next would change the pack forever, one way or another. Above them, the moon slipped fully out from behind a bank of clouds, its light pouring down over the courtyard, over the broken strands of hair still lying forgotten in the great hall, and over Elena's face, illuminating her features with a pale glow that seemed, just for a moment, almost otherworldly. Neither of them noticed the first strands of new hair beginning to shimmer faintly silver at her temples, but they would notice soon enough. Marcus's grandmother had been the last true keeper of the old stories, and Marcus had spent that entire night trying to remember every fragment of what she once told him by the fireplace when he was still a boy, who believed wolves could speak the language of stars. Now, sitting across from Elena in the dim light of her private chamber, he tried to piece those fragments into something whole. "The hair is not just a symbol," Marcus said, pacing slowly across the room. "My grandmother said the moon goddess ties a piece of her own light into every luna on the night of the moon bonding. That light lives in the hair, growing stronger with every year the marriage remains true. Cutting it without the luna's full and willing consent is considered an offense against the goddess herself, not just against the woman. And if the luna does not forgive the alpha," Elena said slowly, "what happens?" Marcus stopped pacing. "The goddess withdraws her blessing from him. His strength weakens. His authority over the pack begins to crumble, piece by piece, until the wolves themselves can no longer feel bound to obey him." Elena absorbed this in silence, staring at her hands. Outside, the first gray light of morning was beginning to creep over the eastern hills, and somewhere in the distance, a pack messenger's horn sounded twice, announcing the start of a new day, as though nothing unusual had happened the night before. "There is something else," Marcus added carefully. "The old stories say the luna's hair does not stay cut. If her heart remains pure, and her claim to the bond remains true, it grows back, but different, touched by the goddess directly, rather than through the marriage bond. Some say it shines like moonlight itself." Elena reached up and touched the ends of her shortened hair, feeling something unfamiliar there, a faint warmth that had nothing to do with body heat. "I do not want revenge, Marcus," she said quietly. "I do not want the pack to suffer because of what he did to me." "I know," Marcus said, "but I do not think this is about what you want anymore. I think it is about what the goddess has already decided." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. It was Greta, an older pack healer who had served the Blackthorn family for 3 generations. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she stepped inside without waiting for permission. "My Luna," Greta said, "you must come see this." They followed her down to the great hall, the same hall where Elena had knelt only hours before. The morning light poured through the tall windows, illuminating the stone floor, where her fallen hair had been left overnight, no one having dared to touch it. Except now it was gone. In its place, a thin ring of silver frost covered the exact spot where the hair had fallen, as though something cold and powerful had passed through that precise location during the night, untouched by any door or window that remained locked. "The staff found it this way at dawn," Greta whispered. "No one entered the hall. No one touched anything. It was simply gone, and this appeared instead." Marcus and Elena exchanged a long look. Word of the strange frost spread through the estate within the hour, whispered from servant to servant, from guard to guard, until it inevitably reached Damien himself, who arrived in the great hall with Seraphine trailing close behind him, both of them dressed as though nothing at all had changed since the night before. "It is nothing," Seraphine said dismissively, examining the frost with a curled lip. "Frost forms in old stone buildings. It means nothing." "In summer?" Greta asked, though she kept her eyes lowered respectfully. "My Alpha, with respect, I have served this pack for 40 years. I have never once seen frost form indoors during the warm season." Damien said nothing, but his eyes drifted toward Elena, who stood at the edge of the hall, arms crossed, watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Something about her seemed different this morning, though he could not place exactly what. Perhaps it was simply the shorter hair, still unfamiliar to his eyes after seeing her the same way for 15 years. But it was more than that, and some instinct deep within his wolf recognized it, even if his conscious mind refused to. A subtle shift in the air around her, a faint charge, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Clear the hall," Damien said abruptly. "Everyone, return to your duties. This is a matter for the pack healer, nothing more." The room emptied slowly, reluctantly, servants and guards casting backward glances at the frost ring as they filed out. Seraphine lingered a moment longer than necessary, her gaze fixed on Elena, with something sharp and calculating behind her otherwise pleasant expression. "You look tired, Elena," Seraphine said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Perhaps you should rest. Being former Luna must be exhausting." "Former?" Elena's voice remained perfectly calm. "I do not recall abdicating my position, Seraphine. A haircut, however cruel, does not undo a marriage bond." Something flickered across Seraphine's face, there and gone so quickly that only someone watching closely would have caught it. Doubt, perhaps, or fear. "We shall see," Seraphine said finally, before turning and following Damien out of the hall, her heels clicking sharply against the stone. Once they were alone again, Marcus turned to Elena. "She is worried." "She should be," Elena replied, though there was no triumph in her voice, only a quiet, steady resolve that had not been there the day before. "Marcus, I need you to gather everyone still loyal to the true laws of this pack. Quietly. I do not know what is happening to me, but I intend to find out, and I do not intend to do it alone." Marcus nodded firmly. "You have my loyalty, Elena. You always have." Over the following days, small changes began appearing throughout the Blackthorn estate, subtle enough that most dismissed them as coincidence, but troubling enough that the older wolves, the ones who remembered the days before Damien's father took the throne, began speaking in hushed voices behind closed doors. Damien's morning training sessions, once a display of dominant, effortless strength before the assembled warriors, grew strangely difficult. He found himself out of breath faster than usual, his shifts between human and wolf form taking noticeably longer to complete, a fact he blamed on stress, on poor sleep, on anything except the truth, slowly closing in around him. Younger wolves who had always instinctively lowered their eyes in his presence began, ever so slightly, to hold his gaze a moment longer than tradition allowed. Small acts of defiance, barely noticeable individually, but adding together into something that made the hair on the back of Damien's neck rise with unease he refused to name. Seraphine noticed too, though she said nothing to him directly, choosing instead to watch and calculate from the shadows, already planning her next move should the ground beneath her ambitions begin to shift. And in her private chamber each night, Elena sat before her mirror, watching the ends of her hair grow back, strand by strand, faster than any healer could explain, each new strand catching the candlelight with a faint, unmistakable silver shimmer that had never been there before. She did not yet understand what was happening to her, but she understood, with a certainty that settled deep into her bones, that whatever it was only just beginning. A full week passed before Damien finally admitted to himself that something was wrong, though even then he refused to say the words aloud to anyone, least of all Seraphine, who had taken to spending most of her days in the private wing of the estate that had once belonged exclusively to Elena. The trouble began during a routine border patrol along the eastern boundary of Blackthorn territory. A rival pack, the Ashgrove Wolves, had been testing the edges of that boundary for months, small provocations, meant to gauge how the Blackthorn pack might respond. Damien had always handled these situations personally, his mere presence enough to send Ashgrove scouts retreating without incident. This time was different. When Damien arrived at the border in his wolf form, flanked by a dozen of his strongest warriors, the Ashgrove scouts did not retreat immediately as they always had. Instead, their leader, a scarred veteran named Corwin, held his ground for several long, tense seconds, studying Damien with narrowed eyes, before finally, reluctantly, calling his wolves back. It was a small thing, perhaps too small for anyone else to notice. But Damien noticed, and the unease that had been building quietly in his chest for days sharpened into something closer to genuine fear. "Did you see that?" he asked Marcus, who had accompanied the patrol at Elena's quiet suggestion, though Damien did not know that part. "See what, my alpha?" Marcus replied, keeping his tone carefully neutral. Corwin hesitated. He should not have hesitated. Damien's wolf form paced restlessly along the boundary line. For 10 years, that man has retreated the moment he sensed my presence. Today he looked at me like I was... He trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. "Like you were what?" Marcus pressed gently. "Like I was ordinary," Damien finished, and the words seemed to cost him something to say. That night, back at the estate, Damien found himself standing outside Elena's chamber door for the first time since the night in the Great Hall. He raised his hand to knock, then lowered it, then raised it again, caught in an internal battle he had not expected to face. Finally, he knocked. Elena opened the door herself, dismissing the 2 guards who normally attended her at night. She looked at her husband standing in the hallway, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "May I come in?" Damien asked, and his voice held none of the cold authority from the night of the cutting. He sounded, for the first time in longer than Elena could remember, almost uncertain. "Why?" Elena asked simply. "I need to understand what is happening to me." Elena studied his face for a long moment, before stepping aside to let him enter. The chamber was lit only by candlelight, and Damien noticed immediately how the flames seemed to bend slightly toward Elena whenever she moved, an almost imperceptible pull that he would have dismissed as imagination just a week earlier. "Sit," Elena said, gesturing to a chair near the window. "I will tell you what I know, though I confess, I do not fully understand it myself." She explained what Marcus had told her, the old stories about the sacred hair, the bond with the moon goddess, the warning about what happened to an alpha who severed that bond without his Luna's consent. Damien listened in silence, his expression growing more troubled with every word. "You believe this?" he asked when she finished. "You believe the goddess herself is punishing me?" "I believe," Elena said carefully, "that something is happening that neither of us fully understands, and that ignoring it will not make it go away. Your warriors are noticing the change, Damien. Soon your rivals will notice too. Corwin already has." Damien's head snapped up. "How do you know about Corwin?" "Marcus told me about the border patrol." Elena's expression remained calm, though something sharp flickered behind her eyes. "You cannot hide this, Damien. Weakness in an alpha does not stay hidden for long, not in a world where every neighboring pack is watching for exactly this kind of opportunity." Damien buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in years, Elena saw something in him that looked almost like the boy she had fallen in love with, stripped of pride, genuinely afraid. "What do I do?" he asked quietly. "Tell me what to do and I will do it." Elena considered him for a long moment, weighing dozens of possible responses, each one carrying its own risks and consequences. She could offer forgiveness now, quickly, and perhaps restore his strength before any real damage was done to the pack's stability. Or she could wait, let him understand fully what he had broken, before deciding whether it deserved to be repaired at all. "I do not forgive on command, Damien," she said finally, "not even to save your throne. If I forgive you, it will be because I choose to, when I choose to, and not one moment before. And if you never choose to, then perhaps that is the answer the goddess intended all along." Damien left her chamber that night without another word, though the conversation replayed in his mind for hours afterward, sleep refusing to come. He thought of Seraphine, curled comfortably in the private wing, utterly untroubled by the crisis unfolding around them, and for the first time, he allowed himself to truly question what exactly he had sacrificed his marriage for. The answer, hidden and denied for weeks, was beginning to surface. A secret Seraphine had used to blackmail him from the very beginning, one that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with power. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the estate, Seraphine was not idle. She had noticed Damien's growing weakness just as clearly as anyone else, and rather than feeling concern for the man she claimed to care for, her mind moved swiftly toward opportunity. If Damien's authority was truly crumbling, then perhaps it was time to accelerate her own plans, rather than wait patiently for a wedding that might never come. She summoned a messenger late that night, a young wolf loyal only to gold rather than any particular pack, and gave him instructions to carry a sealed letter to a contact deep within Ashgrove territory. The letter contained information that would, if delivered successfully, change the balance of power across 3 neighboring territories, and position Seraphine exactly where she wanted to be when the dust finally settled. She had not expected Marcus to be watching from the tree line as the messenger departed, his sharp eyes catching the exchange of a small leather satchel just before the young wolf disappeared into the darkness beyond the estate's borders. Marcus followed at a careful distance, staying downwind, his heart pounding with the certainty that whatever he was about to discover would change everything. Marcus tracked the messenger for nearly 2 hours through dense forest, before the young wolf finally stopped at a hollow oak tree, marking the boundary between Blackthorn and Ashgrove territory. There, a second figure emerged from the shadows to accept the leather satchel, exchanging only a handful of words before both parties disappeared in opposite directions. Marcus recognized the second figure instantly. It was Reeve, a known information broker who sold secrets to whichever pack paid the highest price. A man with no loyalty, except to his own profit. Rather than confront Reeve directly, which would have been foolish given the man's connections, Marcus made a difficult decision. He would need to intercept the information before it reached its final destination, or failing that, discover exactly what it contained. He returned to the estate before dawn, exhausted but resolved, and went straight to Elena's chamber despite the early hour. She was already awake, sitting by the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. "Seraphine is selling secrets to Ashgrove," Marcus said without preamble. "I do not yet know what secrets, but I intend to find out." Elena's expression hardened. "This is bigger than jealousy over a marriage, then. She has been planning something from the very beginning." "I believe so," Marcus said, "and I fear that whatever leverage she holds over Damien, whatever secret forced him to cut your hair, is connected to this." Elena stood and walked to her writing desk, retrieving a small key from a hidden compartment beneath the wood. "There is something I have never told you, Marcus, because I did not fully understand its importance until now." She opened a locked drawer and withdrew an old, weathered letter, its wax seal broken long ago. "I found this 3 years ago, hidden among Damien's father's belongings after he passed. It details a debt owed by the Blackthorn pack to the Ashgrove pack, dating back 2 generations, involving a stolen territory dispute that was never properly settled. If this letter became public knowledge, it would give Ashgrove legal grounds, under the old treaties, to challenge Blackthorn's claim over the entire eastern forest." Marcus stared at the letter in disbelief. "You have known about this for 3 years?" "I hoped it would never matter," Elena admitted. "I hoped whatever old grievances existed between our fathers would simply fade with time. I was wrong to stay silent, and I see that now." "Do you think this is what Seraphine is using against Damien?" "I do not know for certain," Elena said, "but it fits. If she discovered this letter somehow, or something similar, she would have exactly the kind of leverage needed to control an Alpha King without him ever fully understanding why he was obeying her." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. It was Greta again, her expression grim. "My Luna, you must come quickly. The Alpha has collapsed during his morning training." They rushed to the training grounds together, finding Damien surrounded by a circle of worried warriors, struggling to push himself upright from where he had fallen mid-shift, caught awkwardly between his human and wolf forms, in a way that should have been physically impossible for an Alpha of his bloodline. Seraphine arrived moments later, her expression carefully arranged into concern, though Elena noticed the calculation still present beneath the surface. "Get him inside," Seraphine ordered the warriors, taking charge with practiced ease. "He needs rest, nothing more." "He needs the truth," Elena said quietly, stepping forward. Every eye in the training grounds turned toward her. Damien, still struggling to steady himself between forms, looked up at his wife with an expression of raw, unguarded desperation that silenced any protest Seraphine might have offered. "Tell me," he said, his voice strained. "Whatever it is, Elena, tell me now." Elena knelt beside him, ignoring the gathered warriors, ignoring Seraphine's furious glare, and spoke clearly enough for everyone present to hear. "There is a letter, Damien. One your father hid away, concerning an old debt to the Ashgrove pack over the eastern forest. I believe Seraphine discovered it, or something like it, and has been using it to control you ever since the day you two first became close." The training grounds fell utterly silent. Damien's eyes moved slowly from Elena to Seraphine, searching her face for denial, for outrage, for anything that might disprove what he had just heard. Seraphine's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. "You have no proof of this," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "I have the original letter," Elena replied calmly. "Locked away for 3 years, waiting for a moment when it might actually matter. I believe, Seraphine, that you found a copy somehow, perhaps through the very information network you have been using to sell our secrets to Ashgrove as we speak." Gasps rippled through the assembled warriors. Marcus stepped forward to confirm what he had witnessed the previous night, describing the exchange between the messenger and Reeve in careful, deliberate detail. Damien, still weak, still struggling to fully control his own shift, stared at Seraphine with an expression that had finally, completely, shed every trace of the affection he once believed he felt for her. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Seraphine's eyes darted around the circle of warriors, searching for any avenue of escape, any argument that might save her. Finding none, her expression shifted from panic to something colder, harder, more honest than anything she had shown since arriving at Blackthorn territory. "You were always going to lose your throne eventually, Damien," she said, her voice suddenly stripped of all its former sweetness. "The old debt guaranteed it. I simply decided I would rather be the one holding the winning hand when it happened than watch from the sidelines while Ashgrove took everything." "You used me," Damien said. "I used what was available," Seraphine corrected coldly. "You made that remarkably easy." Before anyone could respond, a horn sounded in the distance. 3 sharp blasts that every wolf in the territory recognized instantly as the signal for an approaching army. Ashgrove had arrived at the border, and they were not retreating this time. Chaos erupted across the Blackthorn estate within minutes of the horn's warning. Warriors scrambled toward the armory, messengers ran toward the outer watchtowers, and Damien, still weakened and unsteady on his feet, tried desperately to pull himself together enough to lead his pack against the coming threat. "You cannot fight like this," Marcus said, gripping his alpha's shoulder to steady him. "You can barely hold your own shift. If you go to that border now, Corwin will see exactly what we have all been trying to hide, and Ashgrove will tear through our defenses within the hour." "I have no choice," Damien said through gritted teeth. "I am still the alpha. My people expect me to stand at the front." "Your people expect you to protect them," Elena interjected, her voice cutting through the panic with surprising clarity. "That is different from standing at the front while barely able to shift. If you collapse on that battlefield, Damien, it will not inspire your warriors. It will terrify them, and terrified warriors lose wars." Damien looked at her, torn between decades of instilled pride and the plain, undeniable truth of her words. "Then what would you have me do? Hide inside these walls while Ashgrove marches through our territory?" "No," Elena said. "I would have you let me stand beside you instead." The training grounds fell silent again, warriors and elders alike staring at their Luna in stunned confusion. A Luna, standing at the border during an active conflict, was almost unheard of, reserved only for the most desperate final defenses in pack history. Situations where every available body was needed, regardless of rank or role. "Elena, this is not a defense of last resort," Damien said carefully. "You do not need to." "I am not asking your permission," Elena said, and something in her tone made even the oldest elders straighten with unconscious respect. "I am telling you what I intend to do. Whatever is happening to me, whatever the goddess has begun weaving into my blood since the night you cut my hair, I believe it may be exactly what this pack needs right now." She held up her hand before he could argue further, and in the pale morning light, every wolf present could clearly see the faint, unmistakable shimmer running through the strands of her regrown hair, silver and glowing softly, even without direct sunlight touching it. A collective gasp swept through the gathered pack. "The old stories," Greta whispered, awestruck. "They are true. She has been touched directly by the goddess." Elena did not fully understand what was happening within her, could not explain the strange warmth pulsing beneath her skin whenever she thought of the pack's safety, but she trusted the feeling, with a certainty that surprised even herself. "Marcus, gather every able warrior," she commanded, and to everyone's astonishment, Marcus obeyed instantly, without so much as glancing toward Damien for confirmation first. "Damien, you will come with us, but you will stay behind the front line. Let your warriors see that their alpha still stands, still leads, even while recovering his full strength. And let them see that their Luna stands with him." Within the hour, the Blackthorn pack marched toward the eastern border, a formation unlike any the territory had seen in generations, with Elena walking directly beside Damien, rather than safely hidden away within the estate walls. At the border, Corwin's forces stood arrayed in intimidating numbers, easily double the warriors Blackthorn could muster on short notice. Corwin himself stood at the front, his scarred face set in grim determination, clearly prepared to press the advantage he had sensed building for weeks. "Damien Blackthorn," Corwin called out, his voice carrying easily across the tense space between the two forces. "We have proof of an old debt owed to Ashgrove territory, one your pack has conveniently ignored for 2 generations. Today, that debt comes due." "There is no debt that justifies invasion," Damien called back, forcing steadiness into his voice, despite the exhaustion still gripping his body. If Ashgrove has a legitimate claim, bring it before the Council of Elders, as tradition demands. Tradition, Corwin repeated with a humorless laugh. Your own Luna's hair lies cut and stolen, given to a mistress like a trophy, and you speak to me of tradition? The words landed like a physical blow, and Damien felt every eye among his own warriors turn briefly toward him, the shame of that night resurfacing in front of an enemy force, eager to exploit any weakness. But then Elena stepped forward, and something in her bearing made even Corwin pause. I am still Luna of this pack, she said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar resonance that seemed to hang in the very air around her. Whatever quarrel exists between our territories, it will not be settled through invasion, and it will certainly not be settled by insulting a bond that remains, despite everything, unbroken. Corwin studied her for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable. Then, slowly, deliberately, he looked toward the sky, where the moon remained faintly visible even in daylight, a rare occurrence that superstitious wolves on both sides took immediate notice of. The old moon watches this, Corwin murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Interesting. Withdraw your forces, Elena said. Bring your claim before the council within 7 days, properly, formally, as the old treaties demand. If your grievance is legitimate, it will be honored. If it is not, you will have wasted an opportunity for peaceful resolution over a war you did not need to start. The two forces remained locked in tense silence for what felt like an eternity, warriors on both sides gripping weapons tightly, waiting for the first sign of aggression that would spark open conflict. Then, to the astonishment of nearly everyone present, Corwin raised his hand, signaling his forces to stand down. 7 days, he said, the council will hear our claim. But know this, Elena Blackthorne, if your alpha cannot answer for the debt his father buried, this territory will belong to Ashgrove, regardless of what treaties say. He turned and led his forces back across the border, leaving the Blackthorne pack standing in stunned, grateful silence. Damien turned to Elena, his expression a complex mixture of relief, admiration, and something that looked almost like fear of the woman his wife was becoming. How did you do that? He asked quietly. I do not fully know, Elena admitted. But I intend to find out before those 7 days are finished. That evening, after the pack had returned safely behind the estate walls, and the immediate danger of invasion had been pushed back by 7 crucial days, Elena made a decision she had been quietly considering since the moment Marcus first told her the old stories. She would seek out her sister. Elena's sister Willow had left the Blackthorne pack nearly 8 years earlier, under circumstances the family rarely discussed openly. Willow had been mistreated by an earlier pack hierarchy that valued obedience over independence, and rather than continue living under rules she found suffocating, she had chosen the difficult, often dangerous path of a rogue wolf, surviving outside any pack's protection entirely. Elena had not seen her sister since the day Willow left, though occasional letters, carried by trusted messengers, had kept a thin thread of connection alive between them over the years. You cannot travel alone, Marcus insisted when Elena informed him of her plan. Not with Ashgrove forces still gathered at the border, and certainly not while whatever power is growing inside you remains completely unpredictable. I need answers only Willow can provide, Elena said firmly. She left this pack because she refused to accept limitations others tried to place on her. If anyone understands what is happening to me, it will be her. Then I am coming with you, Marcus said, leaving no room for argument. They departed before dawn the next morning, traveling swiftly through forest paths that avoided the main roads where Ashgrove scouts might still be watching. Elena had received word through an old contact that Willow currently resided in a small settlement of rogue wolves nestled deep within the neutral territory that bordered 3 separate packlands, a place where no single alpha held authority, and survival depended entirely on mutual respect between independent wolves. They found the settlement by midday, a modest collection of simple dwellings built into the natural shelter of a rocky hillside, smoke rising peacefully from several chimneys, despite the settlement's reputation for housing wolves considered dangerous or unpredictable by traditional pack standards. Willow emerged from her dwelling before Elena had even finished approaching, some instinct alerting her to her sister's arrival long before any formal announcement could be made. Elena, Willow's voice, carried a mixture of surprise and immediate concern, as she took in her sister's shortened, silver-streaked hair. "What happened to you?" The sisters embraced, years of distance dissolving instantly in the familiar comfort of family, and Elena found herself explaining everything that had happened over the past week, from the humiliation in the Great Hall to the confrontation at the border, while Willow listened with growing intensity, her expression shifting from sympathy to something far more serious. "You do not fully understand what you are describing," Willow said once Elena finished. "This is not simply an old story come true, Elena. This is our bloodline finally awakening." "What do you mean, our bloodline?" Willow led them inside her modest dwelling, retrieving an old, carefully preserved journal from a locked chest that had clearly traveled with her since leaving the Blackthorn Pack years earlier. "Our grandmother never told you this, because she believed the knowledge was too dangerous for anyone still living within pack politics. But our family descends directly from the first moon priestess, the very first Luna ever blessed by the goddess herself, generations before the Blackthorn line even existed." Elena stared at her sister in disbelief. Why would she keep something like that hidden? "Because power like this attracts exactly the kind of ambition that nearly destroyed Damien's own pack this week," Willow said grimly. "If certain wolves knew our bloodline carried this potential, they would have sought to control it, to marry into it, to use it for their own gain, long before either of us were old enough to understand what was happening. Grandmother believed silence was the safest protection. But now the bloodline is awakening within me," Elena said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. "Because Damien broke the sacred bond, and something in that betrayal triggered whatever was always waiting inside my blood." "Precisely," Willow confirmed. "The old stories about the Luna's hair are true, but they only tell part of the tale. For most Lunas, cutting the sacred hair without consent simply weakens the offending alpha over time. But for a Luna carrying our bloodline, the betrayal does something far more significant. It forces an awakening that would otherwise have remained dormant for her entire life." "What does that mean for me?" Elena asked. "What am I becoming?" Willow studied her sister carefully before answering. "You are becoming exactly what our ancestor once was, Elena. A living conduit for the goddess's judgment, capable of discerning truth from lies, capable of commanding respect from any wolf, regardless of pack hierarchy, and capable, if necessary, of removing an alpha's blessing entirely, should he prove unworthy of the throne he holds." The weight of these words settled over Elena slowly, each implication unfolding with growing significance. She thought of Damien, weakened and struggling, of Corwin's forces waiting at the border, of Seraphine's betrayal still unresolved, and of the 7 days remaining before the council would hear Ashgrove's formal claim. "Can you teach me?" Elena asked. "Whatever this power is, I need to understand it before those 7 days run out." Willow considered the request carefully, glancing briefly toward Marcus, who had remained respectfully silent throughout the entire conversation, before finally nodding. "It will not be easy," Willow warned. "This kind of power does not respond well to force or impatience. It requires clarity, honesty with yourself above all else, and a willingness to accept truths you may not want to face." "I have already faced the truth about my marriage," Elena said quietly. "I do not think anything else can surprise me at this point." Willow's expression grew unexpectedly gentle. "Oh, sister. There is still so much you do not yet understand, about yourself, about Damien, and about exactly what the coming days will demand of you." She stood and moved toward the door, gesturing for Elena to follow her outside, where the afternoon sun had begun its slow descent toward the western hills. "Come," Willow said. "We have very little time, and a great deal of ground to cover." While Elena trained under her sister's guidance in the neutral territory, events at the Blackthorn estate moved forward with dangerous momentum. Seraphine, stripped of her carefully constructed disguise, remained confined to a guarded chamber, pending judgment from the Council of Elders, though her confinement did nothing to slow the ambitious calculations still turning behind her composed exterior. She had not survived years of manipulation and careful positioning by giving up at the first sign of exposure, and she certainly did not intend to start now. Late one night, 3 days after Elena's departure, Seraphine convinced her guard, a young wolf named Callum, who had long harbored a quiet infatuation with her, to relay a message to a trusted contact within her original birth pack, a small but ambitious territory that had watched the growing tension between Blackthorn and Ashgrove with considerable interest. The message contained a proposal both audacious and carefully calculated. Seraphine offered her original pack the opportunity to intervene in the coming council proceedings, presenting themselves as neutral mediators between Blackthorn and Ashgrove, while secretly working to ensure Damien's authority collapsed entirely, leaving a power vacuum that Seraphine, positioned strategically, could then fill through an old, rarely invoked pack law that allowed a Luna's replacement to claim the throne if the sitting Luna abandoned her post during a time of crisis. Elena's absence, meant only as a temporary journey to seek her sister's guidance, had inadvertently created exactly the opening Seraphine needed. She is planning something, Marcus told Damien on the fourth day, having intercepted whispers among the estate staff about unusual activity within Seraphine's confined chamber. I do not yet know exactly what, but I do not trust her silence these past few days. Elena should be returning soon, Damien said, though worry had begun creeping into his voice as the days passed without word from his wife. I hope whatever she is learning from her sister proves worth the risk of her absence. It will, Marcus said with more confidence than he entirely felt. Elena does not act recklessly, my alpha. If she believed this journey necessary, then it was necessary. Damien nodded, though the uncertainty in his expression remained. His own strength had begun slowly returning over the past few days, though nowhere near the level it had once been, and he found himself wondering, in quiet, private moments, whether that recovery had anything to do with Elena's growing distance from the estate, or whether it represented something else entirely, some sign that perhaps her heart was softening toward forgiveness, even from afar. He did not yet understand how completely wrong that assumption was. On the fifth day, Seraphine's original pack sent a formal delegation to the Blackthorn estate, presenting themselves publicly as concerned neutral parties, eager to help mediate the escalating tension with Ashgrove before the council proceedings could begin. Their leader, a smooth-spoken elder named Halden, requested a private audience with Damien to discuss sensitive matters concerning the upcoming judgment. We understand your current difficulties, Halden said once he and Damien were alone in the private study, his tone carrying the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to negotiating delicate situations. The absence of your Luna during such a critical time must weigh heavily on your authority. Perhaps our pack could offer assistance in ensuring stability during these proceedings. What kind of assistance? Damien asked carefully, sensing an undercurrent beneath the elder's pleasant words. There exists an old provision, Halden continued smoothly, allowing for a temporary Luna to be recognized during periods when the sitting Luna proves unable to fulfill her duties, simply as a precaution, of course, to ensure your pack maintains full standing before the council. Damien's expression hardened immediately, the implication becoming clear despite the elder's careful phrasing. Elena has not abandoned her duties. She is pursuing knowledge critical to our pack's survival, and she will return well before the council convenes. Of course, Halden said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. I simply wish to ensure all options remained available to you, should circumstances change unexpectedly. After Halden's delegation departed, Damien sat alone in his study for a long time, turning the conversation over in his mind, an uncomfortable suspicion growing steadily stronger. He summoned Marcus immediately. I want you to speak with the guard assigned to Seraphine's chamber, Damien instructed. Discreetly. I want to know if she has had any contact with anyone outside these walls in the past 5 days. Marcus's investigation revealed the truth by nightfall, though the revelation troubled him deeply. Callum, when confronted directly, broke down almost immediately, under the weight of guilt he had clearly been carrying since agreeing to help Seraphine, confessing the entire scheme in a rush of frightened, regretful words. She told me it was harmless, Callum said miserably. Just a message to her family, nothing more. I did not know it involved plans against the Alpha. Marcus brought the full confession directly to Damien, who listened with a growing cold fury that surprised even himself, given how thoroughly Seraphine's betrayal had already been established days earlier. She never stopped scheming, Damien said quietly. Even confined, even exposed, she never stopped. What will you do? Marcus asked. Damien stood, moving toward the window that overlooked the estate grounds, the pale evening light casting long shadows across the courtyard below. I will make certain she faces judgment before the same council that will hear Ashgrove's claim. And I will make certain that whatever provision Halden's pack believes exists to replace Elena It dies before it ever reaches formal consideration. He turned back toward Marcus, something resolute settling into his expression that had been notably absent in recent days. "Send word to Elena," Damien said. "Tell her the council convenes in 2 days, not 7. I do not know if that message will reach her in time, but she deserves to know the ground is shifting faster than any of us anticipated." Marcus nodded and departed immediately, leaving Damien alone with the growing certainty that whatever remained of his marriage, whatever chance still existed for genuine forgiveness, would be decided far sooner than he had ever prepared himself to face. Marcus's message reached Elena and Willow just as the sun began setting over the neutral territory on the 5th day of training, delivered by a swift young messenger wolf who had run without rest to close the distance in time. 2 days, Elena repeated, reading the note twice to make certain she understood correctly. The council has moved the proceedings up by 5 full days. "Someone is applying pressure," Willow said, immediately understanding the implications. "Pushing the timeline forward before you can fully return, before you can fully prepare." "Seraphine," Elena said with certainty. "Even confined, she continues working against us." Willow studied her sister carefully, weighing how much progress they had truly made in the limited time available. Elena's training had progressed remarkably quickly, faster than Willow had dared hope, the dormant bloodline responding with unusual eagerness once properly guided, as though it had been waiting 8 years for exactly this moment to fully awaken. "You are not yet ready," Willow admitted honestly. "There is still so much you have not learned, control you have not fully mastered, but I do not think we have the luxury of additional time." "Then teach me what matters most," Elena said. "Whatever will help me most in that council chamber, teach me that first, and we will address the rest afterward." Willow led her sister to a quiet clearing behind the settlement, the same location where their training sessions had taken place each day, marked by a natural circle of standing stones that Willow claimed had been sacred to their bloodline for generations, long before either sister had been born. "The most important lesson," Willow said, "is understanding that your power does not come from anger or from a desire for revenge. It comes from truth. The goddess granted our bloodline the ability to discern honesty from deception and to command respect from those who recognize genuine justice when it stands before them. If you enter that council chamber seeking punishment for Damien, seeking to humiliate him as he humiliated you, your power will falter. But if you enter seeking only truth, seeking only what is fair and right for your pack, your power will be unshakable." Elena absorbed this carefully, closing her eyes and reaching inward toward the strange, warm energy that had been steadily growing within her chest since the night of the cutting. "I do not know if I have fully forgiven him," she admitted quietly. "I do not know if I ever will." "Forgiveness and justice are not the same thing," Willow said gently. "You do not need to forgive Damien to demand that truth prevail in that chamber. You do not need to forgive him to protect your pack from Ashgrove's claim, or to ensure Seraphine faces consequences for her betrayal. Those are separate matters entirely." They practiced through the remaining hours of daylight and well into the evening, Willow guiding Elena through exercises meant to help her distinguish genuine truth from carefully constructed lies, teaching her to sense the subtle currents of deception that ran beneath confident words, and helping her learn to project the quiet, unshakable authority that their ancestor had once used to guide entire generations of wolves toward justice. By the time exhaustion finally forced them to rest, Elena's hair had grown noticeably longer, the silver strands now catching even the faintest starlight, with a soft, steady glow that seemed to pulse gently in rhythm with her own heartbeat. "You are ready," Willow said, though worry remained evident in her voice. "As ready as 5 days could possibly make you." "Will you come with me?" Elena asked. "To the council?" Willow hesitated, old wounds from her own departure clearly resurfacing at the suggestion of returning to pack politics she had deliberately left behind years earlier. "I do not know if my presence would help or complicate matters further." "You are my sister," Elena said simply, "and you carry the same bloodline I do, even if you chose a different path. I would feel stronger, knowing you stood beside me." After a long moment of consideration, Willow nodded slowly. "Then I will come, not as a rogue wolf returning to pack life, but as your sister, standing beside you when you need me most." They departed before dawn the next morning, traveling as swiftly as possible back toward Blackthorn territory, the urgency of the shortened timeline pressing heavily on every step of their journey. Marcus met them at the territory border, relief evident on his face at their safe return, though the tension in his posture immediately signaled that matters had grown more complicated during Elena's absence. Seraphine has not stopped scheming, Marcus explained as they hurried toward the estate. She contacted her birth pack, attempting to have you replaced through an old provision meant for Lunas who abandoned their duties. Damien discovered the plot and has ensured she will face judgment before the council, alongside Ashgrove's claim. And Damien himself? Elena asked. How does he fare? His strength continues returning slowly, Marcus said, though nowhere near what it once was. I believe, Elena, that only your presence, your judgment, your choice regarding forgiveness, will determine whether he fully recovers or continues weakening indefinitely. Elena absorbed this information in silence as the estate finally came into view ahead of them, its familiar towers rising against the morning sky, though everything about returning felt different now than it had felt only 5 days earlier. She was no longer simply Elena, humiliated Luna seeking answers about a broken tradition. She was something more now, something the pack had not seen in living memory, and within hours, every wolf gathered for the council proceedings would witness exactly what that transformation truly meant. The council chamber had never held so many wolves at once. Elders from Blackthorn territory filled the traditional stone benches along the eastern wall, while Corwin and his Ashgrove delegation occupied the western side, their expressions ranging from cautious curiosity to open hostility. Halden's delegation, representing Seraphine's original pack, sat uneasily near the back, clearly having anticipated a very different outcome than the one now unfolding before them. Damien stood at the center of the chamber, his strength still visibly diminished compared to the commanding presence he had once carried effortlessly, though something in his bearing suggested a man who had spent recent days reflecting honestly on his own failures rather than searching for excuses to avoid them. When Elena entered the chamber, accompanied by Marcus and Willow, an immediate hush fell over every gathered wolf. Her hair, now fully grown past her shoulders once again, shimmered with unmistakable silver light that seemed to brighten the entire chamber, and her bearing carried an authority that made even the eldest council members instinctively straighten in their seats. The council recognizes Elena Blackthorn, announced the presiding elder, his voice carrying a note of reverence that had not been present when he addressed her before her journey. We shall begin with the matter of the border dispute. Corwin rose first, presenting Ashgrove's claim with careful precision, laying out the old debt his pack believed remained unsettled from 2 generations earlier. As he spoke, Elena found herself sensing something she had not expected, a subtle current beneath his words. Not deception exactly, but genuine, deeply held conviction that his cause was just. When Corwin finished, Elena rose to address the chamber directly, retrieving the old letter she had kept hidden for 3 years. This debt is real, she said, and her voice carried an unusual resonance through the stone chamber, drawing every eye toward her. Damien's father made an error in judgment 2 generations ago, one that was never properly resolved. I will not stand before this council and pretend otherwise. Murmurs rippled through the Blackthorn elders, clearly surprised by such open acknowledgement of the claim's legitimacy. However, Elena continued, invasion is not the resolution demanded by our old treaties. The proper resolution involves fair compensation and formal acknowledgement before this very council, exactly as is happening now. I propose that Blackthorn territory cede the disputed strip of eastern forest bordering Ashgrove lands, along with formal recognition of the debt's resolution, ending this grievance permanently rather than allowing it to fester for another generation. Corwin studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing her words against whatever deception he might have expected. Whatever he sensed in her offer, genuine and free of manipulation, seemed to satisfy something within him. This is a fair resolution, Corwin said finally. Ashgrove accepts these terms. A wave of relief passed through the Blackthorn elders, the threat of war lifted through honest acknowledgement rather than denial or aggression. The council then turned to the matter of Seraphine, brought forward under guard, to face formal judgment for her betrayal, her attempted manipulation of pack succession law, and her role in nearly triggering open conflict between 3 territories. Seraphine, still defiant despite her circumstances, attempted to argue that her actions had been motivated by genuine feelings for Damien, rather than pure ambition. Elena listened carefully, sensing the deception woven through every word, the calculated performance rather than authentic emotion. "She is lying," Elena said simply, once Seraphine finished speaking. "Every word she has spoken here has been calculated to minimize her own culpability. I sense no genuine remorse in her, only frustration at being caught." The presiding elder looked toward Elena with evident surprise. "You can discern this with such certainty." "I can," Elena confirmed, and something in her tone left no room for doubt among the assembled council. Seraphine's expression shifted rapidly, from defiance to genuine alarm, recognizing that whatever ability Elena now possessed left her with nowhere left to hide. The council deliberated briefly before announcing their judgment. Seraphine would be permanently banished from Blackthorn territory, stripped of any pack protection, and her original birth pack would face formal censure for supporting her scheme against established succession law. As guards led Seraphine from the chamber, she cast one final, venomous glance toward Damien. "You will regret choosing her over what we could have had together." "I already regret many things," Damien replied quietly, "but choosing my wife will never be one of them." Once Seraphine's removal was complete, the chamber's attention turned inevitably toward the final, most anticipated matter, the question of Damien's continued fitness to rule, given his still diminished strength and the unresolved status of his bond with Elena. The presiding elder addressed Elena directly. "The council must ask, formally, whether you intend to offer your alpha forgiveness, restoring the bond that was broken. The pack's stability depends significantly on this answer." Every eye in the chamber turned toward Elena, waiting. She rose slowly, moving to stand directly before Damien, studying his face for a long moment, searching for whatever truth remained hidden there. "I sense genuine remorse in you," she said quietly, though her voice carried clearly through the silent chamber. "I sense a man who has spent these past days confronting failures he spent years avoiding. That matters to me." Hope flickered visibly across Damien's face. "But forgiveness," Elena continued, "is not something granted, simply because a pack's stability requires it, or because tradition demands it, or because an alpha's strength depends upon it. Forgiveness must be earned, genuinely, over time, not declared in a single moment before an audience of elders." The chamber held its collective breath. "What I offer instead," Elena said, turning to address the full council rather than Damien alone, "is this. I reclaim my full role as Luna of this pack, not as a woman waiting passively for her husband's redemption, but as an equal partner in its governance, going forward. Damien will have the opportunity to prove himself worthy of full forgiveness, but that proof will be demonstrated through action, through time, through genuine change, not through a single ceremony meant to satisfy tradition." She turned back to Damien, her expression softening slightly, though her resolve remained unshaken. "Do you accept these terms?" she asked. Damien, humbled beyond anything pride could have prepared him for, knelt before his wife in front of the entire assembled council. The very posture he had once forced upon her in cruelty, now offered freely in genuine humility. "I accept," he said. "Whatever proof you require, however long it takes, I will offer it willingly." By the time the moon rose fully over Blackthorn territory that night, word of the council's judgment had spread through every corner of the estate and beyond, carried by messengers to neighboring territories, eager to understand exactly what had transpired during that unprecedented gathering. The border dispute with Ashgrove had been resolved peacefully, avoiding the bloodshed that had seemed all but certain only a week earlier. Corwin himself sent formal word by nightfall confirming his pack's satisfaction with the agreed terms, along with a personal message acknowledging his respect for Elena's honest handling of a genuinely difficult situation. Seraphine's banishment took immediate effect, guards escorting her beyond the territory's outer boundary before sunset, her ambitions finally and permanently unraveled by the very scheme she had believed would secure her everything she desired. Her original birth pack, facing formal censure from the council, sent an urgent delegation the following morning, offering extensive apologies and concessions, eager to repair relations damaged by their brief flirtation with Seraphine's plotting. Within the estate itself, changes began taking shape almost immediately. Damien, true to his word before the council, began genuinely including Elena in every significant decision affecting the pack, no longer treating her presence as ceremonial, but as essential to the territory's governance. Elders who had grown accustomed to a Luna who deferred quietly to her alpha's judgment found themselves adjusting to a very different dynamic, one where both voices carried equal weight in shaping the pack's future. Marcus, whose loyalty throughout the entire crisis had proven invaluable, found himself elevated to a position of greater trust and responsibility within the pack's leadership structure, a change Elena insisted upon publicly as recognition for his unwavering support during the darkest days of the crisis. Willow, despite her initial hesitation about returning to pack politics, found herself gradually drawn back into regular contact with the Blackthorn estate, her unique understanding of their shared bloodline proving invaluable as Elena continued learning to fully master the abilities that had awakened within her. What began as reluctant assistance slowly transformed into something resembling genuine reconciliation with the family and life she had left behind years earlier. As for Damien's recovery, it came slowly, deliberately, mirroring the gradual rebuilding of trust between himself and Elena rather than arriving through any single dramatic moment of forgiveness. His strength returned in careful increments, each genuine act of humility and change seeming to restore a small measure of the blessing he had once taken for granted. The pack noticed, watching their alpha's steady transformation from a man who had ruled through inherited authority and careless pride into someone actively working to earn the respect his position demanded. Weeks turned into months, and the strange silver shimmer in Elena's hair became simply another accepted feature of the Blackthorn Luna, a visible reminder to every wolf in the territory of exactly what genuine justice looked like when properly upheld. Young wolves born in the years following the crisis grew up hearing the story not as a tale of humiliation and betrayal, but as a lesson about the difference between authority claimed through birthright and authority genuinely earned through honest, humble leadership. Late one evening, nearly 6 months after the council's judgment, Damien found Elena standing alone in the same courtyard where she had once stood beneath the full moon, grieving the loss of her sacred hair and the marriage she believed had ended that night. "I have been thinking," Damien said quietly, approaching carefully, "about everything that happened, and everything that has changed since." "So have I," Elena replied, though her expression remained thoughtfully unreadable. "I do not ask for your forgiveness tonight," Damien said. "I know that gift comes on your timeline, not mine, but I wanted you to know that whatever the future holds for us, I understand now what I nearly destroyed, and I understand exactly what it took to begin rebuilding it." Elena turned to face him fully, studying his expression with the same careful discernment she had learned to trust completely over the preceding months. Whatever she sensed there, genuine and steady rather than performed for her benefit, seemed to satisfy something within her that had remained cautiously guarded since the night of the cutting. "The pack has changed because of what happened," she said finally. "Not despite the betrayal, but because of how we chose to respond to it. That matters more than either of us fully understood at the time." "Do you regret it?" Damien asked. "The awakening, the power, everything that changed within you because of what I did?" Elena considered the question seriously before answering, her gaze drifting upward toward the same moon that had witnessed her humiliation months earlier, now witnessing something entirely different unfolding beneath its steady light. "I regret the pain," she said honestly. "I regret the betrayal, and I will not pretend that wound has fully healed, even now. But I do not regret who I have become because of it. Perhaps the goddess intended exactly this all along, forcing both of us to become better versions of ourselves than we might have discovered any other way." Damien reached out slowly, offering his hand rather than assuming she would accept it. Elena looked at his outstretched palm for a long moment, weighing months of rebuilt trust against the memory of that terrible night in the Great Hall. Finally, she took his hand. It was not full forgiveness, not yet, and both of them understood that clearly, but it was something genuine, something earned rather than demanded, something built on truth rather than tradition or convenient ceremony. Above them, the full moon shone steadily down over Blackthorn territory, its light catching the silver strands still woven permanently through Elena's hair, a lasting reminder to the entire pack of exactly what had been broken, and exactly what patient, honest effort had managed to rebuild in its place. The Empire had not submitted to fear, or to power claimed through cruelty. It had submitted, finally and completely, to truth, and to the quiet, unshakable strength of a Luna who had refused to accept anything less than genuine justice for herself, and for every wolf who called Blackthorn territory home.